Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Sunday, December 4th. I'm your host, Tom Moore. The college football playoff semifinals are in 27 days. The game against Michigan in 356 days. Friends, we might be counting down to two different games against Michigan relatively soon because, oh boy, the college football playoff selection show is coming up at noon on Sunday. We are going to have our usual live reaction show streaming live at noon as well at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. So just go ahead and pencil that in for your Sunday viewing pleasure because, boy, this is, I feel pretty confident in telling you which four teams are going to be in the playoff. But the order those teams are going to appear in, that's a little bit more of a mystery. I've decided, well, who am I going to bring in to help crack the code on what the college football playoff committee is going to do? Who else could I bring in other than Tony Gerderman of BuckeyeHuddle.com? Tony, we're recording this before the Big Ten championship game has completed, but right now, Georgia's going to win. Kansas State beat TCU, but close and in a controversial finish. USC got firebombed on Friday night, so you feel pretty confident that the field is going to be some combination of Georgia and Michigan and TCU and Ohio State. But it kind of feels like with that combination of results, the committee can do just about anything it wants and justify it to people.
Yeah, I don't even know. Like, usually you have a pretty good idea of how things are going to go. They could go either way in terms of who is 3 and who is 4 with Ohio State and TCU, and there's plenty of justification for each, and there's plenty of reasons not for each. And I think that's going to be the interesting part when they do decide and they tell you why. And it's just going to be the particular things that they decided to focus on rather than the other things. And we can get into all of the reasons why it should be Ohio State at 4 or TCU at 4. I wonder how much will actually come into play of who they think is better between 3 and 4.
This is the conversation they have every year, right? The best team versus the most deserving team versus the most qualified team versus the hottest team at the end of the year versus whatever. And you and I were talking, I was driving back from the MAC championship game on Saturday afternoon and just called you and said, okay, fill me in. I missed, my feed dropped right during the extremely crucial goal line stand of the TCU Kansas State game, and it picked up, and all of a sudden Kansas State is kicking a field goal to win, and it was like, wait, what? TCU certainly scored a touchdown, didn't they? So I had to call you to kind of get the details filled in there. And we started talking about the different justifications here, and you brought up the point that the number one seed, the wording is kind of vague, but they don't want to put the number one seed geographically in a disadvantageous spot. So if it was number 1 Ohio State, you're not going to make number 1 Ohio State play number 4 Georgia in Atlanta. That wouldn't make sense. They wouldn't do that. Do they take into account what matchup would the number 1 team want to play? Because if if they do that, who does number 1 Georgia want to play of the 3 other options on the table for them?
Yeah, they would rather, I think, play TCU. Wouldn't you rather play a team that has been losing in 9 of their 13 games this season? I think so. And when Tyler Shoemaker threw a link out to I think as a FanDuel line for Ohio State and Georgia and Michigan and TCU, and it was Michigan TCU with the larger line. Like, Michigan's favored by more than Georgia is favored by over Ohio State. And you think, well, shouldn't the number 1 team be favored by more over the number 4 seed? So shouldn't TCU be that 4 seed? How can you reward Georgia by giving them a team that is certainly not a reward, I wouldn't think, as opposed to TCU, who, Tom, every year there's a number 4, and it's clearly that is the number 4, that is a sacrificial lamb. I don't see Ohio State as the sacrificial lamb in this thing.
Well, and you can nitpick at Ohio State, and Ohio State has not played a perfect dominating season this year, but Ohio State is also, just in terms of talent on the roster, like pull up the 247 talent composite. I do not need to pull up the 247 talent composite to tell you that Ohio State is substantially ahead of TCU. I mean, I can pull it up if you'd like me to, but you can trust me on this one. Ohio State is substantially ahead of TCU on that one. And TCU has been You mentioned they've been trailing in 9 games this year. They have been living just on the knife's edge all season. I retweeted a guy earlier this week who did basically a simulation of, based on TCU's success rates and their opponent's success rates all season, they were basically as likely to have gone 6-6 this season as they were 12-0. Like, on average, with the results they've had, they should be about a 9-3, 10-2 kind of team. And then you saw them lose again. So now at this point, they're probably as likely to be a 6-7 team as they are a 12-1 team. And that is a team that, how often has that number 4 seed Sacrificial Lamb had the Big 12 Championship Conference logo on their jerseys? It feels like a lot. It feels like we've seen Oklahoma get their heads kicked in that 1-4 game more than a couple times. So if it is, and we're just speculating, and we're going to have plenty of time to break this all down on Sunday, but Tony, if it's Georgia and TCU in one semifinal in the Peach Bowl, who would be the other 2 teams that you would project to make the college football playoff field, and where would they play?
That's a good question, Tom. If you do punch all the numbers together and you sift through all of the data, I think it would spit out Michigan and Ohio State 2 and 3 in the Fiesta Bowl. And there is total justification for doing that for a television product that wants guaranteed ratings. And, the Final Four, the college football playoffs, they do well anyway. But this being a New Year's Eve year, would they like to have that guaranteed viewership of the Ohio State, Michigan, with the lead-in of the Peach Bowl?
As a person with a TV background, I'm going to say yes. I think that would be a game that would draw some interest from across the country. Ohio State, just in terms of the Ohio State fan base, in the city of Columbus, 27% of the televisions that were on Friday night in the city and area around Columbus, 27% of the TVs that were on that evening were watching the Utah USC game. There are no words for how insane that is for a team watching, a fan base watching a game with 2 unaffiliated teams from 1,500 miles away. That is virtually unprecedented. And, the Ohio State-Michigan game, you saw set the most watched game in the history of Fox and all that for the regular season game. If Ohio State and Michigan can play in the playoffs, that will be one of the most watched games in, of the semifinal games. It will be one of the most watched semifinal games ever. Possibly the most watched semifinal game even if it is on a New Year's Eve. If that's a close game, oh boy, that is going to be a crazy TV draw. And, I know the committee is not supposed to take this stuff into account, but also the committee, ESPN's writing them a very big check, and they, I'm sure, would like to have very pretty ratings to sell for this, the future college football playoff TV deals and all that kind of stuff. It seems to me like if you have the opportunity and you can very easily justify putting Ohio State and Michigan together, and just you can point to, well, TCU just lost on Saturday, and well, they the game control and all that. I mean, you could very easily punch up an argument there. I don't know how they don't do that. And what's interesting to me is you have the same Michigan fans who were talking about the fact that Ohio State's soft and Ohio State's such a pushover and Michigan owns the series now, who are among the most upset right now at the idea of having to play Ohio State again, which, Tony, seems a little bit incongruous to me.
You would think that if you were in the playoffs, you would want all of the soft, weak teams in the playoffs that you can get in order to make your chances of winning it all even higher. And you would think Michigan fans would be totally in favor of having Ohio State in there because they've won 2 in a row, and they're very confident that they're going to win 3 in a row. They just thought that third would come next year in Ann Arbor. But, stay confident and just assume that your will be imposed again. I do have to wonder, though, when we talk about the TV product and the TV ranking, the ratings, when we're talking about what the Ohio State-Michigan game could do in the prime time, the converse of that is if Ohio State is in the Peach Bowl with Georgia, that's a 4:00 game that's going to do really well. But then what happens when you go to prime time and it's Michigan and TCU? What happens to those ratings as you have a lesser game and people are like, yeah, I can go out instead?
Yeah, and that has typically been where the issue is you get to 9 o'clock and, you know, the natural inclination for people who are not me is, hey, we should go out and hang out and go to a bar and go be around other people. And like, I mean, that's a thing that some people can do, and I'm not here to pass judgment on that. But yeah, it feels like, boy, that the phrase appointment viewing, that the Ohio State-Michigan game is appointment viewing in a way that Michigan and TCU are not. It isn't, and it's probably a closer matchup. I mean, certainly the point spread would be closer on an Ohio State-Michigan game as opposed to a Michigan-TCU game. The amount of hype surrounding that game would be different. The fun question that I was just texted by one of my buddies says, I was just driving and ESPN Radio had multiple analysts proffering that Bama should be in the playoffs over TCU. I also saw Leinart saying the same in the pregame of the Big Ten title game. Tony, is there any argument that involves any sort of logic or reason that Alabama should be in over TCU?
Nope. No. It's just this. Well, we know Alabama is better. We know they're one of the top 4 teams, and that's fine. I saw, I think, I don't know if it's Bud Elliott or Bill Connolly saying the same thing. It's like, yeah, you may think they are, but if you continue to always give them the benefit of the doubt, yeah, they will be. But if they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt, like they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt this year, you know, maybe they're not one of the top 4 teams, and maybe you shouldn't have to grant them a seat at the table. Reese Davis on game day talking about Ohio State, who has gotten the most benefit of the doubt in the playoff era by far over any other program. And I was just thinking, you know, Alabama's name is always mentioned as a team that should jump other programs, or, you know, because we knew that there was going to be some Alabama 10-2, you know, should they make it? And this is a lot of the same people saying Ohio State shouldn't be able to back their way in, and now they're arguing for an Alabama 2-loss team to back their way in. And it's just the level of just love and adoration for Alabama, even in years when they don't deserve it. It's, I don't know, Tom, is it lazy? Is it fantasy? Lazy fantasy?
You go through the years that Ohio State has not made the playoffs, and there's a lot more of them than the years that Alabama has not made the playoffs, including 2015, when I think it's safe to say that everyone in the nation knew that 2015 Ohio State team was one of, if not the most talented in the nation, because it had all the guys back from the 2014 national championship game that whooped Alabama's butts. So did that 2015 Ohio State team get in? No, because it wasn't just, well, we know they're good. It was, well, they lost to Michigan State. I mean, I'm deeply sorry you lost 2 games, Alabama, but perhaps you shouldn't have lost to a team that just got their butts whooped by Georgia. Like, I am deeply sorry. Best of luck in the Sugar Bowl against Kansas State. I'm sure you'll have fun with them. You know, is Michigan going to have fun with playing Ohio State again? Is Michigan? You know, we talked about Michigan fans. Is Jim Harbaugh going to be happy that he plays Ohio State again? Or is he upset that, well, we already beat those guys? Why should we have to play them? Why should they get the benefit of the doubt? Why should we play them again? Is he happy? And are Ohio State players happy? Is Ohio State coaches happy if they get another crack at Michigan? Or are they looking at this as, we just played them and it didn't go great, and now we have to play them on a neutral site instead of home? You know, what do you think? Who is happier about this matchup if it does happen, Ohio State or Michigan?
No, I think Ohio State is happier, and I think if Ohio State had beaten Michigan and then they were going to play Michigan in the playoffs, Michigan would be happier about that. It's one of these things where, why? Exactly right. Why should we have to beat you again? We just beat you a week ago, and now we've got to do it all over again. I think the team that wins that, obviously, is like, why should I have to do it again? The team that loses it is like, we know how to fix the mistakes that we made. The other team got lucky. It was, 5 plays, 349 yards. You just eliminate those, and everything is different, and things are much more in your favor. So I think Ohio State much happier with playing Michigan than Michigan is with playing Ohio State. That doesn't mean that Michigan isn't confident about playing them. It's just, we just saw these guys. We just did it. Why should we have to prove ourselves over again, except the playoffs is about proving yourself. And so that's the situation that they may find themselves in.
Yeah, this is two of the top three teams. I think after watching TCU, after watching USC, I don't think there's much question that Ohio State and Michigan are two of the top three teams in the country this year. And so, well, if you get to the playoff, sometimes you have to play the other top three teams in the country. That's kind of how the whole system's designed to work. So, boy, Tony, this might be, I don't want to overhype anything, but an Ohio State-Michigan college football playoff semifinal, is it the most anticipated game in the history of Ohio State football, given the stakes and given you had 1 versus 2 in 2006, and that was kind of functionally a college football playoff semifinal. But man, this is right up there, even more so than the 2 versus 3 game 2 weeks ago or a week ago.
Well, the only way this could be more hyped or more important is if it's one game later and for the national championship. So, this would be the most important. Although they have played before, one game away from their version of a national championship, be it the Rose Bowl or whatever. So there are those games. So maybe if you want to throw out a specific one or two of those, the 2002 game or something where Ohio State wins that, and their next game they're playing for a national championship. That's what this would be. But with the stakes, with the situation of Ohio State losing 2 in a row, with the opportunity, I think, to cancel out a loss in the same season, that's obviously never been done. And just having them play twice in a season, I think, would be an interesting experience, perhaps an experiment to see how it's going to go in the future and find out how we all actually feel about it. Because right now it's just theory, this is going to be amazing, or some people think this is going to be terrible. This is, it's going to ruin the regular season. Let's find out.
Yeah, I am all for let's see these two teams that hate each other play more, play a little more often. I don't think they need to play 7 times a year, but if they're playing for the net with the title on the line, I don't think any Alabama or Georgia fans last year were like, this is boring. I don't want to see this. These teams just played in early December. Everyone seemed fine with that. I think everyone can seem fine with this one as well. We will find out if this is what is going to happen, or if Ohio State will have to win their way to playing Michigan by beating Georgia. We'll see how that goes when the College Football Playoff Committee releases its final rankings at noon Eastern on Sunday. Again, Tony Gerdeman, Kevin Noon, and I will be there doing a live reaction show as we do every week with the playoff rankings reveals. We're going to do that at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. You are going to want to be right on there at noon. There's going to be a lot to talk about. There is going to be a whole lot to talk about, and I'm going to guess you guys are going to have some questions. You guys had some questions on Friday night when we did sort of an impromptu thing at about 11:45 at night, and all of a sudden 1,300 people were there talking USC football with us. I'm going to guess there's going to be a little bit of interest with this on Sunday as well, so do make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And while you're at it, go ahead and subscribe to BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. This is going to be, we've said this for weeks now, this is a super, super interesting period in Ohio State football history, a really unique period in Ohio State football history, where they could be 2 wins away from another national championship. They could play Michigan in an unprecedented college football playoff semifinal. We're going to have a bunch of coverage. We're going to have a bunch of shows. We're going to have a bunch of podcasts. We're going to have a bunch of YouTube streams. We're going to have a bunch of articles. We're going to have a bunch of chats on the board. We're going to have all sorts of stuff. But make sure you are a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com so you can be a part of all of that. Sign up today. It is the price of a crappy chain store pizza. Just sign up for a month. Then you can have a family member buy you a subscription for Christmas for an annual membership, and then you're taken care of for next year when Ohio State and Michigan play, 3 times or something. We'll see. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you at noon on Sunday.